My name is Aiden Cross, and today I'm sharing a story that changed everything I believed about family, loyalty, and truth. After my grandfather's tragic death, the lawyer's announcement shattered what was left of our family's peace. What followed wasn't just about money, it was a war for survival. Stay with me till the end, because what happened at that mansion still gives me chills. Before we begin, take a moment to hit subscribe and drop a quick comment telling me where you're watching from. Knowing you're listening reminds me that even when the people closest to you walk away, strangers can still stand beside you. When my billionaire grandfather, Walter Cross, died in a car crash, the news hit me like a punch to the chest. He had been my only supporter, the one man who saw worth in me when my own parents didn't. But nothing could have prepared me for what came next. His lawyer, Julian Pike, revealed the will, and suddenly every eye in the room turned to me. I was named the sole heir to his $8 billion empire. My father, Victor, my mother, Marjorie, and my brother, Nolan, exploded with anger. They demanded I sign it all over to them. When I refused, my father's voice went cold. That same night, they threw me out of the house with nothing but a duffel bag and the silver key my grandfather had once pressed into my palm. He had told me, "For when you have nowhere else to go." At the time, I'd smiled, thinking it was just his sentimental way of showing love. I didn't know it was a warning. Rain followed me through the quiet streets of Fairhaven as I drove towards Stonehaven Manor, his estate in the hills beyond Silverpine. The headlights carved through fog like knives, and every mile brought back flashes of the funeral, the black coats, the whispers, and the shallow condolences. At the memorial service in St. Barrow Chapel, my parents had cared more about flower arrangement than grief. My mother barked orders to the florist for better photos. My father stood near the entrance whispering to a banker about transfers. Even my brother scrolled on his phone as if waiting for it all to end. I remembered how my grandfather once guided my hands across piano keys when I was a child. "You can buy keys," he'd told me, tapping my chest, "but not the soul to play them." Those words had shaped my entire life. That evening, I placed a white rose on his chest and promised I'd honor him, no matter what. When I turned away, I noticed a woman in a gray suit watching me. She gave a quiet nod, as if she already knew my part in this story. Later, I'd learn her name, Carmen Silva, my grandfather's executive director at Crossline Freight Holdings. Outside the chapel, Julian Pike caught my arm. "Tuesday, 8:45 a.m., Langley Row," he whispered. "Your grandfather left something meant only for you." His tone was calm but urgent. That's when I realized this wasn't just inheritance. It was the beginning of a test he'd prepared long before his death. The next morning, gray clouds pressed low over Fairhaven. Julian's office smelled faintly of coffee and old books. I hadn't even sat down before the door burst open. My father walked in, every step heavy with entitlement, the metal of his watch gleaming like armor. My mother followed, pearls flashing at her throat, heels clicking sharply against the wood floor. And behind them came Nolan, sunglasses indoors, smirking as if he already knew he'd win. I had no idea then that this meeting would ignite the war my grandfather had been expecting all along. The next morning, I walked into Julian Pike's office to find my family already waiting. My brother Nolan slouched in a chair, sunglasses on, even though it was barely 9. His grin said it all. He thought the ending was already written. My parents sat at the head of the long, oak table like royalty, preparing for a coronation. Julian cleared his throat and opened a tan legal folder. "Walter Cross was of sound mind when he signed his will," he said carefully. "All procedures were verified by independent doctors. Every session is recorded." My father, Victor, waved a dismissive hand. "We know the drill. Just read it." Julian adjusted his glasses and continued. "I, Walter Cross, leave the entirety of my estate, real, financial, and corporate holdings valued at approximately $8 billion, to my grandson, Aiden Cross." The room froze. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My mother's pearls caught the light as her hand clenched. My father shot to his feet, the chair crashing backward. Nolan slammed his palm against the table. "What about me? What about us?" he shouted. "This is a joke!" Julian didn't flinch. Mr. Cross expected this reaction. His decision was deliberate. He stated that Victor and Marjorie had been provided for during his lifetime, and that Nolan's failed ventures proved he lacked the discipline to manage the family's assets. The legacy was meant to continue through Aiden. Before they could interrupt again, Julian dimmed the lights and played a video. My grandfather appeared on screen, seated in his leather chair, his voice steady despite his age. "If you're watching this, it means I'm gone. Victor, Marjorie, Nolan, I love you, but I can't ignore what you've become. Greed has turned you into strangers. Aiden still remembers what this family was meant to stand for. He visits because he cares. He listens. He will protect what I built with dignity." Silence swallowed the room. My mother muttered under her breath. My father accused Julian of forgery. Nolan demanded a startup fund, claiming my grandfather had promised him one, but the proof was unshakable. Then Julian slid a small envelope across the table, sealed with a crest of red wax bearing my grandfather's initials. He left, "This for you, Aiden. Open it when you're alone." My hand trembled as I slipped it into my pocket. The shouting continued. My father's voice grew sharp. My mother hissed accusations of betrayal. Nolan's insults dripped with jealousy. I stayed silent, watching their fury rise and fade like waves breaking against rock. And then Julian revealed something that stopped even my father cold. "There's a conditional safeguard," he said. "If within 5 months of Mr. Cross's death, Aiden transfers ownership of the estate to another party, 80% of the assets will automatically bypass the recipient and go straight into the Walter Cross Foundation. In short, if he's coerced, no one benefits. The money goes to charity." My father's expression twisted. He planned this. He planned to rob his own family. Julian looked him in the eye. He planned to protect what mattered. The video ended with my grandfather's last message. "Aiden, you will not be alone. They know where to find you." I didn't know who they were, but his voice left a chill down my spine, as if he were still watching. When I stepped outside, the rain had just begun. My phone buzzed. A message from my father. "Tonight, 7:30 p.m. Be home to discuss, or don't call me father again." The silver key pressed against my leg, and the sealed envelope felt like it burned in my hand. That night, their house in North Fairhaven looked almost peaceful from the outside. Stone walls glowing beneath warm lights, tall windows reflecting candlelight from within. But inside, it was war disguised as dinner. We sat around a long mahogany table. My father's voice was measured, his anger buried under fake civility. "Aiden, let's be reasonable. Sign this transfer and you'll receive a 12% lifetime allowance, more money than you'll ever need." He slid another tan folder across the table. I opened it slowly. The words were legal and cold, but my eyes caught one familiar clause, the same philanthropy safeguard my grandfather had built. If I signed, the assets would skip my family entirely. I looked up. "I'm not signing." The silence cracked. My mother's face contorted. "Ungrateful," she spat. "We gave you everything, private schools, lessons, a home, and this is how you repay us?" Nolan leaned forward with a curling grin. "Enjoy your billions, piano boy. Let's see how long you last before you drown in them." My father slammed his fine tumbler down, the sound ringing through the room. "Either you sign or you walk out. You will not call yourself my son again." I stood, pushing back the chair. My hands were steady now. Then I walk. Upstairs, my old room was just as I'd left it. Dusty trophies, a worn quilt, a faded photo of my grandfather by the grand piano. I packed a few shirts, took the photo, and slid my composition journal under my arm. In the garage, surrounded by the smell of oil and rain, I tore open the wax seal on the letter. "If you're reading this from a place that no longer feels like home, go to Stonehaven Manor tonight. Harold will know what to do, and do not fear the sound of cameras." My throat tightened. Whatever this was, it had already begun. Even in death, my grandfather was still leading me, anticipating every strike my family would make. I came downstairs with my duffel bag over my shoulder. My father stood in the hallway, arms folded, eyes like stone. I placed the pen on the table and pushed the papers back toward him. "I'm not signing." The front door burst open, wind and rain roaring through the entryway. My mother's voice sliced through the noise. "You'll regret this, Aiden. Blood is forever. Money won't keep you warm." The door slammed behind me as I stepped into the storm. Rain hammered my face, soaking through my jacket. I gripped the silver key in my pocket so hard it left a mark in my palm. Through the blur of water on my windshield, the house lights flared. In my mirror, I caught sight of Nolan at the window, phone pressed to his ear. His lips moved, just enough for me to guess the words. Plan A failed. What about Plan B? My gut clenched. There was more coming, something I couldn't see yet. The roads of Fairhaven glistened under streetlights as I drove through the sleeping city. Each turn felt heavier, my mind echoing with unfinished melodies. The song I'd never completed in my tiny piano studio. Every note sounded like a heartbeat, steady but uncertain. By the time I reached the iron gates of Stonehaven Manor, the rain had thickened into a curtain between my past and whatever waited ahead. I slid the key into the lock. Click. The gates opened slowly, groaning like something ancient waking from sleep. The drive wound uphill through dripping oaks, the gravel crunching under my tires. The manor rose from the mist like a fortress, dark windows glowing faintly, the same place that had once felt like safety. Tonight, it looked like a warning. Before I could knock, the heavy doors opened. A tall man in a pressed suit stood in the doorway, silver hair slicked back, expression calm. "Mr. Cross," he said quietly, bowing his head, "your grandfather said you'd arrive tonight." It was Harold Denton, the man who had managed my grandfather's estate for decades. His presence steadied me. He guided me inside, through the main hall where chandeliers glimmered above marble floors. The air smelled faintly of cedar and lemon polish. He led me past the conservatory room, where the grand piano sat beneath its velvet cover, silent but waiting. Through the rain-streaked windows, I saw the rose garden, petals heavy with water. "Come," Harold said, his voice low but firm. We walked down a corridor lined with portraits, Cross ancestors staring down from their gilded frames. Their painted eyes seemed to follow me. At the end stood a steel-reinforced door. Inside, a soft hum filled the air. The glow of surveillance screens lit the room in cold blue light. "He had this installed last year," Harold explained. "Said one day it would matter." He warned that what we'd need to guard against might come from within the family itself. The thought hit harder than I wanted to admit. Cameras against your own blood. It was the kind of foresight only born from betrayal. Later, I sat in the archive room by the fire, staring at the old wooden chess set where my grandfather and I had spent countless Sunday afternoons. The sealed letter still weighed in my pocket. I unfolded it again. "I've left behind those you can trust. When they come, open the door for them. You are not alone." The flames cracked. Outside, the rain softened. Then headlights swept across the driveway. My pulse jumped. Moments later, the doorbell rang. One sharp, echoing sound. Harold moved to answer. Standing there, rain dripping from his coat, was Julian Pike, the lawyer who had read my grandfather's will. He carried a dark portfolio binder under his arm. His expression was calm, but his eyes told me he'd come with purpose. "Your grandfather called this the safeguard file," he said, setting it on the table. "He wanted you to have it if your family turned against you. It details a reserve fund separate from the estate. It'll cover 2 years of legal counsel, security, and operations. He wanted you to have room to breathe before they come at you with everything they've got." 2 years. My grandfather had given me not just wealth, but time. A window to survive before the storm hit full force. Harold hesitated, then added, "There's more." He pulled up footage from the monitoring suite. The screens flickered to life. There was Nolan, slipping through a side door the night of the funeral, rifling through drawers before vanishing into the rain. Harold's jaw tightened. That's not all that was captured. The rest, it's best we hold until the time is right. Julian leaned close, lowering his voice. Before Walter passed, he met with Judge Naomi Clark. He asked her to act as an independent overseer to ensure no one could contest your inheritance. She agreed. You're not fighting this alone, Aiden. I sat back in the leather chair, the firelight painting the walls in gold. For the first time since this nightmare began, something inside me steadied. I wasn't just a piano teacher anymore. I was the last wall between my grandfather's legacy and those who wanted to destroy it. Julian rested a hand on my shoulder. Tomorrow, he said softly, others will come. Your grandfather made sure of it, Julian said quietly. But be ready. They won't wait long to strike. I looked around Stonehaven Manor, at the flickering shadows on the walls and the faint scent of cedar that still lingered in the air. For the first time since the will had been read, I didn't feel like a man abandoned. I felt like a man stepping into a battle that had already begun, with a legacy I couldn't walk away from and allies I hadn't yet met. Morning came heavy and still, the kind of silence that hums in the walls, like the house itself is holding its breath. I sat alone at the oak dining table, the chandelier above casting a harsh white glow over rows of empty chairs. Harold appeared at the door. Someone's here to see you, Mr. Cross. I rose, bracing myself for bad news, but when the door opened, I froze. Standing there, raincoat clinging to her shoulders, was Ruth Wallace, the woman who had served my grandparents for more than 20 years. Her tired eyes filled with tears as she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. You look so much like your mother did, she whispered, before she changed. She set down her worn handbag and pulled out 2 leather-bound diaries, placing them gently on the table. These belong to your grandmother, she said. She wrote about every thing, every visit, every kindness, every demand. I opened one, and her looping handwriting leapt from the pages like echoes from the past. Victor came again today, asking for more money. When we refused, he shouted, calling us selfish. Later, Aiden arrived with soup and stayed until Walter's fever broke. Page after page told the same story. My parents and Nolan treating my grandparents like a vault, while I was the only one who came without asking for anything. Each line cut deep, but it also proved that my grandfather's decision hadn't been random. It had been earned. By noon, the second visitor arrived. Carmen Silva, the executive director of Crossline Freight Holdings, the same woman who had nodded to me at the funeral, stepped inside with a sleek laptop bag. Her handshake was firm, her eyes sharp yet kind. Your grandfather asked me to tell you this, she said, opening her computer to reveal spreadsheets and documents. He refused to invest in Nolan's ventures because your brother burned through tens of millions in reckless startups. Walter told me once, a fortune isn't a toy. He believed you would protect it, not waste it. Her confidence steadied me, but her next words chilled me. Not everyone within the company agrees with the inheritance. Some directors have long-standing ties to your father. You should know. There are people inside who will not accept you. Later that afternoon, another car rolled through the gates. Amir Patel, the family's longtime investment strategist, entered the room carrying thick financial binders. He spread them open across the table, his tone measured and calm. Your grandfather planned 40 years ahead, he explained. He built layers of protection around the estate, diversified portfolios, trusts, safeguards. He knew this day would come. One by one, the people my grandfather had trusted appeared. Each brought something. Proof, memory, loyalty. Piece by piece, a shield took shape. Around me, forged not from steel, but from faith. And yet, every new revelation reminded me of how deeply my own family had betrayed him. By dusk, I sat in the archive room surrounded by open journals and scattered papers. The fire crackled softly. My phone buzzed on the table, a message from an unknown number. Tonight at 10:30 p.m., be careful in the study. Not all your allies are truly yours. A cold shiver ran through me. I flipped to the last page of my grandmother's diary. Her handwriting was faint and uneven. Walter said one day everything would belong to Aiden, but he warned, someone inside this house will betray him. The letters blurred as I stared at them. The manor's walls, once comforting, now felt like they were closing in. The rain outside intensified, rattling the tall windows. The chandelier above threw restless shadows across the bookshelves. Every creak of the floorboards made my pulse jump. Then Harold's voice cut through the silence. "Mr. Cross, you'd better come to the monitoring suite." I followed him down the corridor. The hum of machines grew louder. On the glowing surveillance screens, a shadowy figure climbed over the outer fence. The rain distorted the image, but the movements were deliberate, trained. I leaned closer. Before I could make out a face, the feed stuttered and went black. One by one, the monitors flickered, entire sectors of the estate disappearing from view. Julian, who had stayed late reviewing documents, burst into the room. His eyes narrowed. That doesn't happen on its own. Someone with access to the internal codes shut it down. His gaze swept across the room. Which means the breach isn't coming from outside, it's someone in this house. My stomach dropped. The text message hadn't been paranoia, it was a warning. Even in my grandfather's fortress, betrayal had already found its way in. That night, unable to sleep, I walked the long halls of Stonehaven Manor, the storm outside raging harder with every step. The storm outside sounded like a beast clawing at the windows. Thunder rattled the glass. Halfway down the corridor, I froze. Footsteps. Soft, deliberate, not mine. I turned sharply, but the hallway was empty. The portraits of my ancestors stared down, their painted eyes flickering in the candlelight. I walked faster, heart pounding. When I reached the conservatory room, I stopped cold. On the grand piano, illuminated by a single lamp, sat a tan legal folder that hadn't been there before. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a photocopy of a signed legal transfer, bearing my name. The document claimed that I had authorized the full transfer of the Cross estate to my father. My chest tightened with fury. The signature looked identical to mine, every curve, every slant. Julian studied it under the light, flipping through my old samples. "It's forged," he said darkly. "But whoever did this studied your handwriting in detail. These strokes, look here, they match Nolan's old business notes almost perfectly." The implication sank in. My family wasn't just trying to pressure me anymore. They were preparing evidence to destroy me legally, to strip me of both credibility and control. Near 12:15 a.m. the phone rang. The number was blocked. "Hello?" I said cautiously. A low, distorted voice crackled through static. "If you want the truth, come to Iron Bend Wharf tomorrow morning. One of the people you trust isn't who they say they are." The line went dead. I stood alone in the main hall, the fire spitting embers into the dark. The forged contract in my hand felt heavier than iron. Outside, lightning tore across the sky, but it was the silence inside that suffocated me. That night, I realized the war I feared with my family was no longer just about inheritance. It had turned into something colder, a game of deception and betrayal. And somewhere within the walls of Stonehaven and Manor, someone was playing both sides. The next morning, mist hung over the old mill river. The air bit at my face as I parked near the abandoned dock. The planks were slick with moss, creaking under my boots. At the end of the pier stood a lone man, his coat collar raised, face hidden beneath a cap. Without a word, he handed me a small data stick. "Watch this carefully," he rasped. "Not everyone Walter trusted deserves your trust now." Before I could speak, he disappeared into the fog, swallowed by the river's breath. I returned to Stonehaven Manor, dread churning inside me. Harold was waiting in the archive room. Together, we inserted the data stick into the projector. Grainy footage flickered to life. Carmen Silva sitting across from my father at a restaurant table, sliding a folder toward him. His hand closed over it like a predator claiming its prey. Gasps rippled through the room. My pulse thundered. "Carmen, explain this." My voice came out frost-edged, sharper than I intended. She straightened, her expression tight. "That's not what it looks like. Walter asked me to monitor Victor's movements. That could be edited. Look closer. The timestamps don't match. Before I could respond, Amir Patel leaned in, brow furrowed. She's right. Look here, the frame is spliced. Pixels are misaligned. This video's been altered. Someone wants to turn you against her. His voice dropped to a whisper. It smells like your father's doing. He's trying to break the trust your grandfather built. The room erupted. Accusations, denials, tension, cutting through the air. I looked around at the faces surrounding me. Carmen, Amir, Harold. Doubt hung over everyone like smoke. By nightfall, the house felt colder. When I entered my study, something white caught my eye. An envelope slipped under the door. I tore it open. Inside were grainy photographs of me and Julian in his Langley Row office. Across the bottom, scrawled in thick black ink, were the words, "The nearest hand might hold the knife." My pulse thudded in my ears. Julian had been my anchor through everything. Now, even he was under suspicion. I glanced at the people around me, Carmen, Amir, Harold. None of them met my eyes. The silence between us was worse than any threat. That night, I sat at my grandfather's old desk, the diaries, photographs, and forged papers spread before me. The USB drive still blinked faintly in the dark. My grandfather's final words echoed in my mind. Help will find you when you least expect it. But sitting there, I felt the opposite. Completely, terrifyingly alone. The following evening, engines growled outside the gates. Through the surveillance screens, I watched sleek black cars glide up the drive, headlights slicing through the rain. Men in suits stepped out, briefcases in hand, and at the center, Victor and Nolan Cross. Their faces were hard, purposeful. The main hall blazed with light as they entered, shoes striking marble like gunfire. My father's voice cut through the air. Aiden is unfit to manage the estate. We have signed proof. One of the lawyers opened his case, laying out the forged documents. Under the chandelier, the papers gleamed. Perfect. Damning. I rose slowly. That's a lie. Julian stepped forward beside me, placing the real will and its legal safeguard on the table. The Cross estate is protected. If Aiden signs anything under pressure, the assets automatically transfer to the Walter Cross Foundation, not to Victor, Marjorie, or Nolan. The lawyers faltered. My father's jaw clenched. Then Nolan exploded. Enough of this charade. This is mine. All of it. His voice cracked. Rage twisted his face, raw and unmasked. I looked straight at him, my voice low but steady. Then you'll have to take it from me. Nolan's shout filled the hall, anger like a storm. If Grandpa trusted you, Aiden, he would have given it to you years ago. My mother sobbed, clutching my father's arm. How could you betray us after everything we did for you? She cried. I breathed slowly, steadily. The family doesn't demand signatures at funerals. Family doesn't make love conditional. The room erupted. Papers flew, voices rose, accusations cut through the air. Harold Denton raised his hand. Enough. He tapped the console. The surveillance feeds lit up, showing Victor and Nolan in the manners rooms, hands rifling drawers just days after the funeral. The footage was clear and ruthless. Judge Naomi Clark entered, calm and commanding. This evidence supports unlawful entry and attempted misappropriation, she said. Moments later, Chief Dana Mercer appeared, badge shining. If arrests are needed, we'll act, she added. Silence pushed into the room. My father's face was drained of color. Nolan's bravado collapsed. They gathered themselves and left, humiliated. At the threshold, my father spun and pointed. This isn't over, he warned. You'll pay for this. The doors closed behind them with a boom that echoed down the corridor. For the first time in weeks, I felt steadier. I knew the road ahead would be hard, but standing there, I felt the weight of responsibility and the truth of my grandfather's choice. The courtroom, months later, was full. Papers were stacked, legal teams poised. My family's lawyers claimed coercion. They presented the forged document in neat rows. I sat beside Julian Pike, heart beating, voice steady. When a transfer is made under coercion, Mr. Cross's clause activates automatically, I told the court. It prevents the assets from going to anyone who forces the issue. The opposing side fumbled for an answer. Harold plugged in the data stick. Grainy footage showed Victor, Marjorie, and Nolan breaking into Stonehaven after the funeral. Gasps filled the room. Judge Clark struck her gavel. The will stands. All holdings belong to Aiden Cross. The trespass and forgery claims will be pursued. My mother crumpled into tears. Nolan tried to shout, but police guided him back. My father sat motionless, the color gone from his face. The courtroom was quiet and absolute. Months later, Stonehaven felt different, alive with purpose. We opened the Walter Cross Foundation with an initial allocation design that included $2.4 billion for education and community programs. I stood at the podium and said simply, "You can buy the instrument, but you can't buy the music that lives inside a person. True legacy is giving others a chance to play." Applause rose like a tide. That night, the dinner table held a different family: Julian, Carmen, Amir, Harold, and Ruth. We ate, laughed, and told stories. These were the people who had shown me loyalty. On a quiet morning, I placed a white rose on my grandfather's stone at Oakfield Cemetery. "We did it," I whispered. The hill wind moved through the pines like a quiet answer. Back at the conservatory, I sat at the covered grand piano. My fingers found the keys, and I played the unfinished sonata. Each phrase felt like a stitch, a repair to old wounds. When the final chord faded, a recorded voice, my grandfather's, filled the room. "Your music is the answer, Aiden," it said. In the piano drawer, Ruth found a folded letter in Walter's hand. "If you're reading this, Aiden has chosen the right path. The inheritance was never about money. It was about heart." I stared at the page until the words settled. Sunlight pooled across the floor, and for the first time, I felt the future as something I could hold. The estate was protected. The lesson remained. True inheritance is courage, integrity, and the will to honor what matters most.